I called one of my partners and I was like, I'm like terrified to even get on this plane. Like I could just like not board the flight, say that was fun and run away. But I was like, that's not even an option. It was really just like leaning into the messaging, the playbook, and having those guiding principles to know, you know what, it's gonna be okay.
Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, Raw Stories live from Las Vegas. I'm Simon Kutis, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ollie Kune.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And it's with great pleasure that we introduce you to Hillary Unis. Hillary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, excited to be here.
By way of an introduction, Hillary, you are an account executive over at Harness. And today's story is very much around the human element and how you can create success by building these human connections. So we're really excited to go into this story because we go back to a time where you've transitioned away from leadership. You've taken a step back from a leadership perspective into a brand new industry. Take us to that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined Harness in February of this year. So I've been in the role coming up on a year. My last company I was with for 5.5 years. The last 4 years were in leadership positions. So it was a long time in leadership. And when I was observing which type of role I wanted to take into next and really thinking about it, I knew I wanted to get the true technical, like deep experience, and then also deep enterprise experience, because I was managing a mid-market team. And so those were the two things that I knew I was lacking when it came to the overall success. And so I never wanted to be in a place where someone can say, oh, you can't do that because you haven't done it. And so I was like, okay, tell me I can't and I'll prove you I can. And so I was like, game on, let's go. And what led me to Harness was Carlos De La Torre. So I worked with him as a leader at Harness, and he was the one that actually put it in my mind of, hey, have you ever thought of being an enterprise AE? And to be honest, I was looking at other sales positions and in leadership. And when Carlos put that in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes perfect sense, because it's the missing gap of what I need just to complete that experience cycle.
With that in mind, obviously, we've been very, very fortunate to have Carlos on the show. In our last episode that we spoke with him, when we look at the talent he's been able to nurture and, the list goes on. But having that validation and actually having Carlos say that to you, do you think that helped with some of your decisions? Because there's obviously a reason why he's saying it to you, right?
Absolutely. I think, one, having Carlos's confidence in me helped to drive more confidence in myself too, just because Carlos, he's a fantastic executor, his playbook, he's a leader that has successfully built companies time and time again. And having that confidence and the one guiding me in this direction, it was, oh, wait, I can do this and I can be successful. And so it was also one of those things, knowing I had his confidence coming into the role. As you're interviewing with new companies, if I haven't done it before, there's going to be a gap and they're going to question, oh, can she be successful if she hasn't done that before? And so having Carlos and tapping into your network is such an important aspect within sales, any industry. It's something you don't want to lose.
So obviously you've transitioned away from a leadership role. You're now in this new role. You're drinking from the fire hose. Help us understand some of the emotions that you're feeling at this moment. Was there a moment where you started to doubt yourself? And help us understand, what those early days were particularly like.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Drinking from the fire hose, I felt like I was getting like sprayed and like tumbled down the street. It was a lot. Like day 2, I remember I had an 8 a.m. meeting and it was a demo with one of my accounts that I'd recently been assigned. And I'm on this, I'm like, what? I don't even know what we're talking about. I'm just like sitting there. It was like a foreign language to me. And I'm just, okay, like trying to take copious notes and curiously like typing away. And it was 8 a.m. I was jet lagged. I was previously in Japan, got back the night before starting. And I was just like, what did I do? And then the second piece that really got to me, the second week, I was boarding my flight to go to Dallas for PG Tuesday. And I was like, oh my God, I'm cold calling people tomorrow. What am I talking about? And I remember I called one of my partners and I was like, I'm like terrified to even get on this plane. Like I could just like not board the flight, say that was fun, I try, and run away. But I was like, that's not even an option. And so it was really just like leaning into the messaging, the playbook, and having those guiding principles to know, you know what, it's going to be okay.
So you've never sold anything as technical as Harness before, right? So how did you find those initial engagements with your customers, and how were you able to still kind of bridge that gap despite some of those gaps knowledge-wise in the early days?
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, I was previously in travel and expense industry. And so very different industry from Harness with modern software delivery. And so coming in, what helped me to bridge that gap is the playbook. You know, it was coming in with the command of the message, knowing our value drivers, how we're really helping us shape this for companies and the value that we're coming in. And so having that to know, I mean, coming in like the command of the message playbook, I was like, oh, great, I've got my Bible. Okay, we're ready to go. And that was, I think, the biggest thing that helped me of this is what we're bringing to the table. This is what we're solving. This is what's required to get there. And don't just take it from us. Here are the proof points of companies that we've successfully partnered with. And having that in your back pocket when you're cold calling, when you're taking on calls, dropping those reference points. I might not know what they mean, but I can at least, when I have those conversations, it's resonating with the other side. And so, you know, sometimes you feel like you're speaking a foreign language, but based off of the engagement and the interaction, like it makes sense.
So do you think then that's one of the biggest parts that you studied was the strength around the use cases and studying about the value that Harness is delivered to other organizations? Is that one of your key parts in enablement and really focus on that as a...
Absolutely, because we're solving a problem. And so those use cases, it's, okay, what are we specifically attaching to? What's most important? Like, what's that going to unlock for the prospect, for the customer? Like, why are we even here? And so having those value drivers and those use cases, that's really where it starts. Because if you don't have anything you're solving, if you don't have anything you're attaching to, then you're kind of just having a friendly conversation.
So obviously you're studying and trying to understand and get your head around the new space. You're grappling with a whole new industry. What are you doing in those early days? Are you going out having as many conversations and trying to be honest about how you're, you know, some of your early gaps, or are you pretending that you do, or are you just relying on others? What is it that you're doing in those early days to give you that kind of momentum to kind of build from?
Yeah, I would boil it down to a few things. I think first and foremost, it's learning the playbook. So knowing at the core, like, what are the value drivers? What are we solving for? Who have we done this with before successfully? And then the other aspect is, you know, I don't want to like come in and be completely incompetent. Like, I don't want them to know that I'm like very new. They can go to my LinkedIn after I connect with them and see I just started. But you want to have some credibility and you want to just earnestly lean into it and bring yourself in, but also surround yourself with the A team. So I was really fortunate to have a great A team at Harness through the solutions engineers, through my leadership, across the board within Harness. And if I didn't know something, it was finding it out to take that to my next fall. And so part of it was like, you know what? I don't know the answer. That's a great question. I should know the answer. Let me get back to you and follow up in a timely manner.
The theme of the podcast today is also around those human interactions, because what you reflected on was sometimes you did have technical gaps, but you were able to build human relationship with your customers. So help us understand how you were able to use that and leverage that to really still help you get through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the human element, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all people. I think I've seen it many times, that like robotic, where it's like so scientific that you forget at the other end of the table, of the call, wherever that setting might be, they're persons. And at the end of the day, like, they've got a problem that you're looking to solve. And so that's why you're there with them. That's why you're engaging. That's why you're in a sales process. And so leading into that human interaction and finding out what their per drivers are, getting to their personal pain, their personal win, on top of the business win, like, that's what ultimately it boils down to. And when you have that human connection, when you're able to actually like cross that, that's what unleashes so much in the sales process.
What's one of the hardest things that you've had to overcome in making this transition?
I think the hardest part is the imposter syndrome. Like, can I do this? Am I credible? Like, when I show up, I might be having this inner freak out, but like being calm, cool, collected on the outside. And I think the other hard part is just like my own career thing on the line. Like, I stepped into this role knowing that I had these gaps, that I wanted to grow and learn and overcome this mountain, but was it too big of a mountain to attach? And so I think a lot of that was just questioning yourself. I don't think I ever fully like doubted my capabilities because a lot of it just comes down to your why, your grit, and what you can overcome.
Are you conscious of those things? Are you conscious of, this is why I'm doing it? Do you kind of psych yourself up, or is it just something that kind of comes naturally?
Oh, absolutely. I think leaning into your why is one of the biggest drivers in anything. And so if you don't know your why, when you have those really challenging days, and everyone has that, it's not just me overcoming this gap in my skill set, overcoming that and being in those like really deep valleys, you've got the trough of disillusionment where like you start, you're all excited, and then you get to this peak and you're like, oh my God, what did I sign up for? And you have to really remember your why. You have to surround yourself with great mentors that can celebrate the small wins, and just know what you're doing to overcome that. And so you have to be conscious of it. So my why is I want to be successful. I'm afraid of failing. I'd rather, like, the last thing I want to do is fail. It's one of those things of like, do you hate to lose or do you love to win? Like, I hate to lose. I hate to fail. Like, that is what gets me up time and time again. Failure is always something that is critical to learning. And so it's also a question of, okay, what does failure mean to you? But at the end of the day, it's like, I want to make as much money as possible. I want to live a great life, and I don't want to have to question whether I can do things. Like, that's, I think that for me at the end of the day is like, can I live this great life that I want? And can I overcome these gaps? Like, that's my why. I don't want to feel inept in specific areas.
It was interesting. We had John Baim on 2 episodes before we sat down with yourself, and obviously he spoke about his journey when he joined Harness and going through a very similar sort of, transition to you, coming from Perfecto Mobile and now coming into a really complex sale. And he spoke about his first deal and actually getting the monkey off the shoulder, the monkey off the back, however you describe it. Where are you now within your life cycle? You've obviously been here since February. Is that monkey firmly off your back now?
So I was fortunate to acquire a couple current customers coming in. It was a really good way just to like learn, understand the process, how they're using it, and what the success is from that side. It's a really long sales cycle. So I haven't fully executed on my first net new sale. We've got good things cooking in terms of Q4 and also like a really strong H1 lined up for this next year. But the monkey's still there. And so it's still one of those things where I'm like, oh my God, I mentioned, my why, like I want to like make a bunch of money. I've got expensive taste. And so I've had to, be a little more conscious than I'm normally thinking. And part of it too is just that win, like knowing I can do this, I can execute, and seeing the process play out, like that's what excites me.
So obviously, having transitioned from leadership, what are the things that you've taken from leadership that you now have a slightly different perspective when perhaps you were an AE pre-leadership? Is there anything that's kind of different that you're now kind of focusing that you've taken from that perspective?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think taking 4 years in leadership and coming back to an individual contributor role, growing in this, it's only made me a stronger rep, and it's unlocked more opportunity for me because, okay, now I understand why they're asking me to update Salesforce, why they're like, why you're asking. It's like, oh, okay, like I need to do this. Like managing up is just as important as managing down when you're in leadership. And so being able to really understand the why behind PG Tuesday, behind these key activities, and like being able to see beyond, as a rep, it's really easy to be short-sighted where you're like thinking beyond just, oh, I have to do all these things because they're asking me to.
If you could go and revisit your early self, what advice would you be giving to the early Hillary, early on in her sales career?
Oh my gosh. I would have told myself to not get comfortable. I think there's great journeys in staying with a company long term, but I think too many people stay with companies long term because they're comfortable and they're good at it. But you grow by learning and by challenging yourself. And so if you, like in my first company, I was there, it was a fantastic company, but I was there for 4 years and I probably should have left after 2 years because I think I probably set myself back in some areas, but I was comfortable, I was happy, I didn't know any better. And so surrounding yourself with great leaders, great mentors, and staying uncomfortable, because that's how you learn. That's how you have to like grow in the struggle. I talked about failure earlier, but it's like, it's a struggle. That's where you grow. And I think that that's the biggest piece for myself.
How do you go through the process? Obviously, mate, you clearly embrace making mistakes, right? Because you mentioned that that's how you are developing and how you're moving forward. What is your process and what's your mindset when you go and make these mistakes? Is it, I fully embrace it, or do you know what, it hits you and you feel it? How do you deal with that?
Oh my God. I mean, every deal that slips or like you lose or anything, I'll have those moments where I'm waking up and you just like think of, oh my gosh, what could I have done differently? And so having those misses, it's really just thinking of the why, like what could I have done different? Why did it happen? And how can I just grow and improve going forward? I think that's the biggest piece. And that's in anything, not just sales, that you can take that aspect.
Where did you learn that? Where did that come from?
I think it was through my journey in leadership, especially within the quarterly business reviews when you're looking at, okay, what are my highlights? What are my lowlights? And what will I change? A lot of it comes from looking at your lowlights. Why did it happen? And then you want to change based off of those lights and why it happened. So making sure that it doesn't happen again.
Hillary, I think it's a real credit to you that you're sat here with us today. And the reason I say that is because you've just transitioned into a new role. You know, you're going through all of this change, and it's just, you know, the fact that you're just able to embrace change and difficulty and just completely keep yourself uncomfortable. I think it's really, really commendable. And we're so grateful to have you on the show today. Obviously, you've come with a huge reputation. I know how fond everyone is about you in harness.
And you got that pressure.
A lot of people put their reputation on the line for you. But the truth is that, yeah, it's been fantastic having you on. Thank you so much for sharing and being so open and honest. And it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much. This has been great. Really appreciate y'all.
So to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, please do subscribe to our various channels on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. All the links will be in the description below. And we look forward to welcoming you back for another session very soon. Take care.